Alright, here's the lens and it's all there. It's very lightweight, but I double checked it 2 times this morning. It's all there.
Yeah, it's filled with feathers, I guess. Lightweight.
Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer. And this is Thomas. You've seen him at least in one of my videos before. Today we have a very interesting photo walk. We both have the same lens. Exactly the same lens but different cameras. Thomas is unboxing his lens. I unboxed mine earlier today, this morning before I left home. This lens is the TT Artisan 27mm f2.8. It's a very affordable APS-C lens for mirrorless cameras. What camera did you bring today?
I bought my Fujifilm X-T5.
X-T5. I have the Sony a6700. So you have the latest Fuji camera. I have the latest Sony APS-C camera. This is going to be really nice. I've never done this before, something like this, so that we have two same lenses on different camera bodies. In this video we're going to share some of our impressions on this lens on 2 different cameras. And before we go any further, here's a disclaimer. These lenses are review samples from TT Artisan, but they are not sponsoring this video in any way. So, what are your first impressions on the build quality of the lens? By the way, it looks quite nice on the Fuji.
It's small.
It looks quite nice on the Sony too.
Yeah. The build quality seems to be quite decent. It's metallic.
It's some sort of
Some
metal.
sort of metal, yeah. The aperture ring clicks quite nicely.
But it has these 2 sort of tabs on both sides, but the ring is smooth everywhere else, and it's a little bit hard to select the aperture.
Yeah, your fingers get quite close to each other here if you change the aperture, so that's a little bit problematic.
I noticed that you didn't mount the lens shade.
No, I didn't. I usually don't like those.
There is a
Especially
tiny.
if there's not too much sun.
No, not
right
today.
Now. Not today.
There's a tiny lens shade that mounts
Yeah.
on the filter thread. It's quite neat actually. But I think it feels quite decent for such an affordable lens. I think this is like 150 US or euros, so it's really affordable lens, especially when you consider its autofocus lens. So this is a 27mm APS-C lens, so it's roughly the same as equivalent to a 40mm full-frame lens. How do you like the angle of view?
I don't like wasps that are just flying around me. Actually, I like it quite much. Usually I shoot with 35mm, so it's a little bit less. But I also shoot quite a lot with 23mm, so it's somewhere between those, and it's quite perfect, I think.
Yeah, I love this. I have the Ricoh GR3X. It has the same angle of view, or almost the same. I have not compared, but it should be roughly the same. And I love this focal length. I have a 40mm also for my full-frame camera, and I think this is perfect for street photography.
Yeah, not too narrow, not too wide.
Yeah, well said. Thomas, you also have the Fuji 27mm f2.8. How does it feel when you compare them side by side?
Well, both of them are quite well built. The aperture ring feels softer in the TT Artisan. Fuji is a little bit more snappy. The grip in the aperture ring is better in Fuji. It's wider.
Yeah, it seems like it's easier to turn the Fuji aperture ring.
Exactly, and the size is Fuji is a tiny bit smaller.
Yeah.
The weight is the same, I think. It's a bit weird that the 2.8 aperture in TT Artisan is blue. You cannot really see it in the low light.
Yeah, I was wondering about the same thing. Why did they make it blue? It's so hard to see in low light.
Of course, there's a hard stop there, but if you don't know, it looks like it's 4.
Yes, it's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
We just compared side by side the first party Fuji lens and the TT Artisan. What is your general opinion on these affordable cheap lenses? Are they worth it, or should you go straight away to the first party product?
Well, first of all, I haven't tested this yet, so I cannot say anything about the image quality.
Yes, it's the first time for both of us using these lenses today.
Yeah, but the cheaper lenses are a good way to test the focal length if you are not sure if you like the focal length at all. Of course, the Fuji one is weather sealed.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and it's very good optically, but it's also like 250 euros more expensive than this one.
Yes. My opinion is that this is a good way to test if you like the focal length, or if you've never had a prime lens before. It's you can't lose much if you buy one of these and try if you can live with one focal length only. And my previous experience with these affordable cheap lenses is that they're usually pretty good value for money. If you are a Sony shooter, there is no first party 27mm option at all. Sony doesn't make this focal length for APS-C cameras, or for any cameras for that matter. So this is one of the few 27mm autofocus options for Sony APS-C.
So far, I've been using this for 1.5 hours maybe, both on continuous and single shot. And I think the autofocus is quite good. I think it nails it pretty well. There's a couple of moments when it failed me, but those were contrasted backlit situations, so
hard to say if it was...
I have to use it more, but so far I think it's pretty okay. How's the autofocus on the Sony version of
I think it's really good. I'm surprised how good it is. And so far, all my shots are in focus as far as I can tell from the camera screen. I think they are all tack sharp and in focus. And all the focus modes that I have tried so far, they seem to work well. So I'd say the autofocus is quite good. It's not as good as on the best Sony, like the Sony G series lenses. They have dual motors or even more autofocus motors or actuators, so they are faster, but still I think this is surprisingly good for the price.
One more thing, the autofocus is quite quick also, and it's silent, or not completely silent, but not noisy at all, so if you're shooting video it might work, but there's a little bit of focus breathing. Yes, first of all I need to correct something that I said earlier about the autofocus. There's some hunting, and that's a little bit of a problem, at least with this firmware out of the box. It doesn't always hit the target. There's a slight problem sometimes in low light or in a fast-paced situation when I walk quickly and try to snap a photo of the subject. The focus just isn't there. Okay, After a couple of hours of testing, I would say it's a good lens for the price. There are slight problems with but slight problems with autofocus, might be Fuji related, maybe a firmware in the future that fixes that, I don't know. But it's light, small and easy to carry the whole day, which you take if you take street photos, for example.
Based on what you said, I think the autofocus works slightly better on the Sony. I saw some autofocus slow down in the cafe and slightly lower light, but I still think it works quite nicely on the Sony. We haven't said much about the optical performance because you can't really judge it based on the camera screen, but now I'm gonna go into my office and take a look at these pictures on a big screen, and Thomas will send me a few pictures from the Fuji so I can also comment on those. So hang on, you'll get the comments on the sharpness too. Alright, I just took a proper look at the pictures that we shot outside in the street with Thomas. And I also shot a couple of casual test pictures from a balcony to better see how the sharpness is divided across the frame, because those street photos are not really good for that. And indeed, this lens is quite sharp already, wide open at f2.8, and the sharpness is very uniform across the frame. But then again, this is an f2.8 lens and it's relatively easy to design and manufacture compared to an f2 or f1.4 lens. So it better be good already at wide open f2.8. And also, because this is only f2.8, you're gonna be using that f2.8 quite a lot in any kind of low light situation. And then there is some vignetting, of course. Every lens has more or less vignetting, and I usually don't mind some vignetting because I usually add that in post and it usually looks quite good. However, with this lens, the vignetting is quite abrupt or sudden. When you move towards the corners, all of a sudden the corner goes very, very dark. And that can be a little distracting in some situations. Even for me, you can get some flare in your pictures if you shoot into the light. In some pictures it can look quite nice, but it can of course also ruin your picture. I never found that any kind of a problem when I was out there in the street shooting street photos, but it's something to be aware of anyway. There is some barrel distortion, but it's not distracting in every picture. For example, in street photos, the main subject is something else usually, and you're not likely to pay too much attention to some straight lines towards the edges of the frame. However, if you shoot something where those straight lines are the main subject, then you may want to correct the distortion. It's very easy to correct, it's very linear barrel distortion, easy to correct in any post-processing app. Earlier in this video, Thomas mentioned possible future firmware updates that could, for example, improve the autofocus performance. This lens comes with the rear cap that has a USB connector. You can plug this into your computer and update the firmware. However, TD do not support firmware update on Apple computers. That's a big disappointment, big oversight and big downside. So please, TD please do give us Apple users also those firmware updates. There are so many photographers and creative people using Apple computers. So one more time, this is a very nice budget 27mm autofocus option for mirrorless APS-C cameras. For some cameras like Sony, this is also the only 27mm autofocus option when I'm recording this video. So for example, for a Sony user, this is a no-brainer if you like the 27mm angle of view. This is also very compact and very nice for street photography, for example. This is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this little sort of double review. If you found this video useful or entertaining, please do consider buying me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below for that if you don't live in Finland. Thanks and I'll see you in the next one.